North Korea staged a massive military parade. The regime's leader attended the event and vowed to continue developing nuclear programs. Russia claims to have destroyed 6 substations powering Ukrainian railways used to transport foreign weapons. UN Secretary General calls for a ceasefire ahead of a meeting with President Putin. Standard & Poor's kept South Korea's rating at AA. The stable outlook reflects expectations of stronger economic growth than most other high-income countries. Good evening, I'm Daniel Cho. Welcome to our newscast. Let's begin with our top story. North Korea held a military parade late Monday. There, Kim Jong-un announced the regime will continue developing nuclear weapons at the fastest rate possible and may not limit their use to deterrence. Han Sung-woo starts us off.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un attended Monday night's military parade at Kim Il-sung Square in Pyongyang for the 90th anniversary of the founding of the People's Revolutionary Army. According to the regime's Korean Central News Agency, he delivered a speech in which he vowed to continue developing North Korea's nuclear program at the fastest rate possible and threatened to use nuclear weapons if what he called the North's fundamental national interests come under threat, something experts note is a change from previous policies.
It seems North Korea has now expanded the conditions it has for using nuclear weapons to include other things that threaten its interests, such as sanctions.
Kim Jong-un said that although the North's nuclear weapons are fundamentally for deterring war, their use cannot be restricted to that purpose if it puts the regime in what he referred to as an unfavorable situation. Based on data from South Korea's Unification Ministry, the North has held 12 military parades since Kim Jong-un came to power, and he has spoken in person at 5 of them, including the latest one. South Korean military and intelligence authorities say Monday's parade started at around 10 p.m. after a 1-hour opening event. They suspect the parade was the largest the regime has ever held, and that it included some of the regime's new weapons, like the Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missile, along with an estimated 20,000 troops and 250 pieces of military equipment in total. In response to the parade, South Korean President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol's transition team called the North's weapons a real and serious threat and said the incoming administration will strengthen South Korea's alliance with the United States while moving quickly to boost its defense capabilities against the regime's military threats. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
Turning to other stories now, Seoul and Tokyo relations have been especially poor in recent years. President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol is looking to change this. His delegation to Japan met with Prime Minister Kishida, who agreed the urgent need to improve ties. Kim Do-yeon has the details.
South Korean President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol's delegation to Japan says Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is on the same page as Yoon in repairing the bilateral relationship, which is at its lowest point in years. On Tuesday, the delegation led by lawmaker Chung Jin-seok met with Prime Minister Kishida for around half an hour and delivered Yoon's vision on relations with Japan as well as a personal letter to Kishida. According to the Japan Times, during the meeting, Kishida said that with the rules-based international order threatened, strategic cooperation between Seoul and Tokyo, as well as a trilateral relationship including the US, is more necessary than ever. The comments were made when referring to the recent series of missile tests done by North Korea and the war in Ukraine, adding there's no time to spare. Kishida also briefly addressed the core issue of the current low point in the two's relationship, history, saying that the ongoing issues over wartime forced labor, among other things, need to be resolved. Yoon's delegation said that the incoming administration is aware of the weight of the situation and that they will make diplomatic efforts to please all parties. Also, the delegation said the two agreed to create more opportunities to expand civilian exchanges between the two countries in order to regain trust. Chung and his team also met with travel and airline companies the day before, highlighting the need to resume direct flights between Seoul and Haneda Airport near Tokyo, as well as lifting mandatory quarantine when traveling between the two countries. As for the invitation to Yoon's inauguration ceremony in May, when asked by reporters, Chung said it's not a conventional method diplomatically to invite a head of state. Instead, Kishida would have to show his interest first. No specifics were talked about, but if Kishida does want to attend, the incoming administration will be prepared to welcome him. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Seoul's finance chief nominee believes the biggest challenge are slow growth, widening wealth and income gap, as well as rising debt. Ahead of next week's confirmation hearing, Chu Kyung-ho submitted some written responses to questions from lawmakers. Kim Hyun-sung shares with us his insights.
The nominee for South Korea's next finance minister has highlighted what he thinks are the economy's three biggest problems. Finance Minister nominee Chu Kyung-ho, who would also serve as Deputy Prime Minister if appointed, gave the National Assembly his written response to lawmakers' questions on Monday, ahead of his parliamentary confirmation hearing. He pinpointed tepid growth, the divide between rich and poor, and the increase in household and national debt as the South Korean economy's biggest challenges. For slow growth, Chu emphasized the need to improve economic conditions. This includes loosening regulations and cutting company taxes so that markets and private firms can reach their full potential. He also said the government should let private firms steer the economy. Nominee Chu said that a private-led approach will help create jobs. Chu also mentioned that the government needs to continue to strengthen efforts to help the underprivileged. On real estate, it's likely Chu will push to reform the transfer income tax and the comprehensive real estate tax system. He said that the current tax system is heavily burdening homeowners. He intends to find a way that will stabilize the real estate market and household debt. Chu's parliamentary confirmation hearing is scheduled for May 2nd. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
With the media industry changing rapidly, the incoming administration aims to help with the launch of a major South Korean streaming service. The Transition Committee announced a plan to foster the new media industry by boosting investment in training and education and setting up overseas promotion agencies to help local streaming services enter the global market. It also plans to set up private-public funding to produce streaming content. This is part of efforts to reform the domestic media environment by cutting red tape and enhancing incentives. Details will be sorted out by a special committee to be set up after Yoon takes office. As the number of new COVID-19 cases decline in Korea, the death toll fell below 100 for the first time in 50 days. Authorities project daily infections to continue falling for now, but that could stop after a while. Issue brings the updates.
With South Korea continuing to see an overall decline in its daily COVID-19 figures, the country on Tuesday reported 80,361 new infections. There were 82 related deaths, with the daily death toll dropping to 2 digits for the first time in 55 days. The number of critically ill patients was at 613. This comes a day after the country lifted most of its virus prevention measures, with people now allowed to eat at indoor venues, on trains, and can sample food at supermarkets. Research by Korea Central Disease Control Headquarters found that around 56,000 people in South Korea have had COVID-19 more than once. That's about 0.347% of the people who have contracted the virus. Of those, 65 had caught COVID-19 3 times. Meanwhile, 5 out of 6 unnamed organizations that provided data and research to South Korean health authorities forecast that by May 18th, daily infections will drop to below 40,000. The number of hospitalized critically ill patients is expected to drop to under 500 after 2 weeks from Tuesday and to under 300 after 4 weeks. However, authorities noted that it is also likely that the potential emergence of new variants and a reduced effectiveness of vaccines over time may result in an increase in the number of infections.
Every week, the number of patients is decreasing by 30%. It is possible that such a decline will continue for a while, but the outlook isn't all positive. After a month or two, the decline may stop, and we may reach a stationary phase.
Authorities on Tuesday also announced that the new Omicron sublineage BA.2.12.1 found in other parts of the world has not yet been confirmed in South Korea. The sublineage is known to be 20% more transmissible than the BA.2, commonly known as stealth Omicron. It was first confirmed in the United States in December of last year. Since then, it has been found in 14 countries around the world. 이시후, Arirang News.
Elsewhere around the world, driven by fears of a Shanghai-style lockdown, Beijing residents started panic buying food and other necessities. Authorities are now mass testing people in the Chinese capital, which is reporting fewer than 20 cases a day. Kim Ji-yeon has the latest.
Beijing residents are panic buying food and medical supplies as fears mount that a Shanghai-style citywide lockdown could be imposed on the Chinese capital. Beijing reported 19 new coronavirus infections on Monday, which is low by global standards, but could still trigger further measures, including lockdowns, in line with China's commitment to its zero-COVID policy. It would depend on the results of mass virus testing in its largest district of Chaoyang, of 3.5 million residents and workers who have been ordered to take tests 3 times this week. Already more than a dozen residential buildings were put under a lockdown in Chaoyang, an affluent downtown area home to embassies and international businesses.
What happened in Shanghai is understandable. That's such a big city. Even though the government made great efforts, there must have been something that was less than satisfactory. It's okay as long as they made corrections.
Shanghai has seen more than 400,000 COVID-19 cases since late March, resulting in nearly 140 deaths. Residents in China's most populous city have took to social media to vent their discontent as they suffer from major food shortages and delivery delays as the city's lockdowns enter their 4th week. In Beijing, photos and videos across social media showed empty shelves at some stores as shoppers appeared to ignore assurances that the city would not suffer the same fate as Shanghai. Some of the draconian lockdown measures in Shanghai include placing electronic door alarms, forcefully evacuating people from homes to carry out disinfection procedures, and setting up green barricades outside homes without prior warning. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Russian forces appear to have stepped up offensive in the east and south of Ukraine. Moscow's foreign minister claims there are considerable risks of the conflict escalating into a nuclear war. Meanwhile, UN Chief Antonio Guterres is set to hold talks with President Vladimir Putin. The U.S. Defense Secretary is meeting with America's NATO allies in Germany. Kim Bo-kyung has the full story.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine grinded into its 3rd month on Sunday, yet there are no signs of it coming to an end. Though the situation seems dire, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told a gathering of military leaders in Germany on Tuesday that Ukraine clearly believes that it can win, and so does everyone else at the gathering.
Russia's invasion is baseless, reckless, and lawless. It is an affront to the rules-based international order. It is a challenge to free people everywhere. And as we see this morning, nations of goodwill from around the world stand united in our resolve to support Ukraine in its fight against Russia's imperial aggression.
According to Ukrainian officials on Tuesday, Russian forces have stepped up their offensive in both the south and east of the country, yet are facing stiff resistance, being pushed back in several locations. In the remaining Ukrainian stronghold, the Azovstal steel plant, where people are sheltering in the besieged port city of Mariupol, plumes of smoke show just how dire the situation is.
We've lost everything, absolutely everything, all we've worked for. We just don't know what to do and what to do to start again.
In Kherson, Russian troops took control of the city council building on Monday, according to the city's mayor, who said that armed men entered, took away the keys, and replaced the Ukrainian guards with their own. Regarding Russia's plans to stage a referendum on April 27th to ask its people to approve the independence of a new entity called the Kherson People's Republic, Zelensky said it is a sham and that Ukraine would win as Kherson residents are refusing to support Russia. Meanwhile, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told Russia's state television that the world should not underestimate the considerable risks of the conflict escalating into a nuclear war. The comments are supposedly aimed at America's top officials who visited Moscow via train on Sunday and pledged over $322 million worth of new military assistance to Ukraine. On the same day, Russia bombed 5 railway stations in central and western Ukraine, reportedly killing at least 5 people. To mediate, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is to hold talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday in Moscow. He would reportedly then travel to Kyiv to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky later this week. Regarding their meeting, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba reportedly said on Monday that the UN chief needs to focus primarily on one issue, the evacuation of Mariupol, saying that it's what the UN is capable of doing. Meanwhile, the UK announced that it is to cut tariffs on all goods from Ukraine to zero and remove all quotas in order to provide Ukraine much-needed economic support. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Back here in the nation, President Moon Jae-in received credential letters from the new ambassadors to Korea of 14 countries, including Indonesia and Ukraine. After a welcoming ceremony, he emphasized that diplomats must make meaningful contributions through cooperation with South Korea during their incumbency. To the new Ukrainian ambassador to South Korea, he expressed hopes that peace is achieved quickly. Dmitry Ponomarenko showed gratitude for Seoul's support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. April 26 marks the 36th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster, nuclear disaster that is. Residents of Slavutych, a town in northern Ukraine that was purpose-built to evacuate personnel from the crisis, held a nighttime vigil. Among those in attendance were the people who worked at the plant at the time of the disaster in 1986. The town's mayor said the prospect of a nuclear war was equally terrifying to that of a nuclear disaster, as they already know what the consequences would be. The comments came after Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov talked about the considerable risk of the conflict in Ukraine turning into a nuclear war. Despite the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and massive disruptions to global supply chain, the South Korean economy still posted growth in Q1. But it was slower than the previous quarter, mainly due to a decline in consumer spending and corporate investment. Ji-young helps us look beyond the digits.
South Korea's economic growth slowed from January to March this year compared to the previous quarter. The Bank of Korea reported on Tuesday that the country's gross domestic product adjusted for inflation is estimated to have grown 0.7% on quarter in the first 3 months of this year. The country's economy grew at a slower pace compared to the 1.2% growth recorded in the fourth quarter of last year. The central bank attributed slower on-quarter growth to reduced consumer spending and corporate investment amid surging inflation and COVID-19 cases. Firms spent less as investment in construction decreased by 2.4% and facilities investment also declined by 4%. Consumer spending was also reduced by 0.5% in the first quarter, with people cutting down spending mainly on clothing, entertainment, transportation, restaurants, and lodging. But one Bank of Korea official says consumer spending is recovering following the lifting of social distancing measures.
Consumer spending is increasing in April, led by face-to-face services, including transportation, lodging, and entertainment. Also, more people movement in general will be helpful for our economic growth.
Exports, which are the key driver of the economy, remained relatively solid, up 4.1% in the first quarter, led by semiconductors and chemical products. Imports also increased by 0.7%, driven by the rise of global oil prices. However, analysts say that based on first quarter growth, it would be difficult to achieve the central bank's 2022 economic growth projection made in February, which stands at 3%.
As long as there continues to be geopolitical risks to the global supply chain, the country's economy is likely to have low growth. In order to achieve the target, comprehensive reform is needed in certain industries. It also depends on the action taken by the new government.
Commenting on the first quarter growth in a social media post, Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki stressed that South Korea has achieved economic growth which has surpassed market expectations amid risks, including the spread of the Omicron variant, supply disruptions, and the war in Ukraine. He added that the country's economy has shown robust growth despite international agencies, including the IMF, slashing the global economic outlook for this year. 엄지영, Arirang News.
Standard & Poor's kept South Korea's rating at AA. The agency said the stable outlook reflects its expectation that Seoul will have stronger economic growth than most other high-income countries over the next 3 to 5 years. S&P does not believe geopolitical risks on the peninsula will escalate to the point of hurting the nation's economic fundamentals. The global firm kept Korea's sovereign credit rating at AA since raising it in August 2016. The world's richest person has struck a deal to buy Twitter for more than $40 billion. Elon Musk claims to have made the move to ensure freedom of speech on the platform. Yoon gets us up to speed with the developments.
American social networking service Twitter on Monday accepted Elon Musk's bid to take over the company for $44 billion. This will shift control of the social media platform populated by millions of global users to the richest person in the world, who is also among its most influential users. Discussions had accelerated over the weekend, prompting Twitter to negotiate with Musk over buying the company at his offered $54.2 per share price. This deal represents a 38% premium on the closing price of shares on April 1st, the day before Musk revealed that he had bought more than 9% of Twitter stock. Musk has been talking about making substantial changes to Twitter over the past few weeks through regulatory filings, tweets, and an interview at a TED conference. This includes softening Twitter's attitude towards content moderation. A self-described free speech absolutist, Musk said in an interview at a TED conference on April 14th that Twitter should be an inclusive arena for free speech. In a news release reporting the deal, the 50-year-old said, "Free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy, and Twitter is the digital town square where matters vital to the future of humanity are debated," while sharing the statement on his Twitter. He also said Twitter's algorithm for prioritizing tweets should be public and less reliant on advertising. Other alterations suggested by Musk include allowing users to write longer tweets, creating an edit feature for postings, and trying to stop spam bots. But some Twitter staff have voiced concerns over Musk's takeover. One employee told New York Times that Musk's unpredictable nature might affect the work environment at the company. With Twitter being a private company, employees' salaries are also considered a concern as workers get 50% of their salary as stock options. Meanwhile, the White House declined to comment on Musk's deal on Monday, but said that Joe Biden has long been concerned about the power of social media platforms, adding they can spread misinformation. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
Warren Buffett is taking bids from the public for a chance to have lunch with the world's most famous investor. This will be the last of the charity event he has been doing for 2 decades. Bids can be submitted online through eBay starting June 12 for lunch with Buffett at the New York City Steakhouse. Bidding starts at $25,000 and ends on June 17th, with the proceeds going to an organization called Glide that helps homeless people in San Francisco. The most recent event was in 2019. The winning bid, $4.6 million. Bloomberg asked Buffett's company why the lunch is being discontinued. Berkshire Hathaway said they'll find other ways to work with Glide to help the homeless. Starting next month, the nation's capital will offer free classes on how to take care of pets. It's called the 2022 Seoul Pet Citizens School. Owners learn how to do obedience and behavior training and ways to correct their dog's problem behaviors. For those who can't go in person, it's also available on Zoom. There are online classes for cat owners too, as well as on pet adoption process. The sessions will be held once a week starting mid-May for 3 to 5 weeks. For in-person classes, sign-up is on a rolling basis at the website now on your screen. No limit for online classes.
Spring rain has now tapered off, and then seasonable heat we've had for the past couple of days will also ease off. The weather will be breezier from this point on. A drastic drop in temperatures in the morning is expected tomorrow, so make sure to dress up warm. Daytime temperatures will be milder, nearing the seasonal norms, with Seoul peaking at 23 degrees Celsius. Finest concentrations will temporarily soar for western central regions. That includes the Seoul metropolitan area. And for southern regions, gusty winds are forecast to remain until Thursday. In particular, for the south coast and Jeju Island, winds may be gusting up to 8 to 16 meters per second. For those near the coastlines, please stay away from the waterfront or the breakwaters. Inland regions will be under sunny spells tomorrow. Seoul will start off at 10 degrees Celsius. As for the daily highs, Daejeon and Gwangju will get up to 23 degrees. Busan and Jeju will reach 20 degrees Celsius. For the Seoul metropolitan area, another round of showers is in the forecast this coming Friday. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world. That's all from us. As always, thank you for staying with us.